VikesNow, Dustin Baker, post-week 16, The Vikings are 12-3. Nobody had that on their bingo board. So whatever happens the rest of the way, it really is a triumphant season, especially for a first-year head coach. Of course, the stakes are high. You still want to get to the Super Bowl and whatnot. What we're going to do today, and we'll get into the Packers stuff later this week, but we want to decompress the Giants win, another thrilling situation. Go figure. Every win is like this, and it's just going to be that way. You just got to accept it. There's no change. This is who they are. But I want to go over 7 or 8 things that, broad takeaways, some of the fun reaction stuff, and I'll just hop right into it. The first is that the Ed Donatel defense did its signature thing this week, and that was force a couple turnovers, and special teams got a blocked punt, which was curiously not considered a turnover. But I've told you, 4 or 5 times that the Donatel defense is built to allow oodles of yards, evidently blitz every now and then, and force turnovers. When it doesn't force turnovers, the Vikings will lose. They're just not very good on defense unless they force turnovers. You got to pound that mantra home. It's going to be true until it's not anymore. And if it turns out not to be true anymore, the calendar's probably going to say September 2023 with different players, maybe a different defensive coordinator. We shall see. But the way that the Vikings conduct all of their 2022 business is whether or not the defense can get turnovers. When it does, the Vikings win. When it does not, the Vikings usually lose, with the small exception of the Patriots game. What was that, Thanksgiving night? The Patriots didn't have any turnovers, but still lost. Mac Jones looked phenomenal. But thankfully, Patrick Peterson got a pick, and Brian Asamoah got a fumble, and Josh Metellus got that block punt. All of those were tied turners, and bada bing, the Vikings won by 3, so every single one of those turnovers was needed. But remember this, for the next 2 weeks, and then however many weeks they play in the playoffs, hopefully it's, 4? If the Vikings don't force turnovers, stick a fork in them. They're not good enough on defense, fundamentally, to win football games without turnovers. Now, of course, turnovers are always vital to every football game, but I think this version of Vikings has shown and proven that they ain't going to win unless they're getting turnovers. Thankfully, against the Giants, they got them, and wouldn't you know it, they won. The next, I'll make an argument the coolest, most impactful, or not maybe thrilling because Joseph got in the mix, part of the Giants game was Brian Asamoah's force fumble, recovery, and little scamper thereafter. Why? Well, it could just be a young guy making a play, and that happens. Or it could be the development before your very eyes of this third-round rookie from Oklahoma. And that is super important because the off-ball linebackers currently on the depth chart are aged 30. That means before too long, probably in a month, we're going to be staring at each other saying, we need some faster, younger linebackers. Well, you probably have one on the roster. Asamoah is progressing according to plan. He's starting to get more snaps. It seems that Kevin O'Connell is implementing a pitch count for certain dudes, getting prepared for the playoffs, because in the grand scheme of things, the Vikings are either going to get the 2 or the 3 seeds, so now he has the luxury of intermingling some of these younger guys and keeping the veterans, the key guys, on a pitch count to be prepared for the postseason. And one of the byproducts of that in recent weeks is Brian Asamoah. His forced fumble was marvelous, and even though he's not built like a linebacker from my childhood when they used to have shoulder pads that were humongous, Asamoah just kind of looks like a running back. Maybe that's because he has Dalvin Cook's old number. He was the real deal, at least for a play, and that's humongous because if you're looking at the 2023 trajectory, 2 31-year-old linebackers who aren't crazy fast, and you would probably need to invest draft capital in one if you weren't sold on Asamoah. However, the Asamoah transaction, the fumble and the recovery was marvelous. So there's a world where you can start to groom Asamoah for the future as an off-ball linebacker for the Vikings and need not, spend a first or a second rounder on an off-ball linebacker. And that's a big deal because we didn't know that. We didn't know if Asamoah was just a guy, who's just going to be a mediocre contributor. Well, right now he's He's trending to be more than that, and that's a big deal for a team that employs old off-ball linebackers. Next, Kirk Cousins is hitting his stride in December. Suddenly, after... Well, he's always done these fourth quarter comebacks, even last year in 2020. But he did them especially in all of these close wins this season. But now, starting with that Lions game where the Vikings lost, where he looked crisp as hell, he's hitting his stride. He's never done this before. December is usually Cousins' most average month. He's at the peak of his powers in October and November. And usually in December, it's kind of like, oh, he's pretty good, but now it's the inverse. He was meh in September compared to his usual regimen. October and November were pretty good, and now December looks fantastic, and that's the way it should be. For a dude who's paid $35 million, he had 299 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, no picks, even though he got away with one, against the Giants, and this is what you need from your handsomely paid quarterback heading to a playoff push with the number 2 seed. I'm going to talk more about Cousins at the very end of the show, but he's hitting his stride, he's getting better, and it probably has everything in the world to do with his acclamation to Kevin O'Connell and the trust that O'Connell has in him. But this is a change of pace. The Vikings don't know a Kirk Cousins who is absolute gangbusters in December. We know the Kirk Cousins who's money in November, but he switched the months, and we will take it. Hopefully it trickles into January. Next is T.J. Hockenson. He had 13 catches for 109 yards. 13 catches is a franchise record for the Vikings. I didn't look it up, but it's probably Hockenson's personal best too. But one little thing I want to mention about him is, so we know him now. He's been around since the Commanders game in purple clothes, and he's going to have a drop or two. You just have to live with it. He's showing his tips and tricks and habits, and I think about since he's got here, there's 2 or 3 drops that makes us go, bring Rudolph back. He had surer hands than this. Well, Hockenson has a couple drops, and I think we've seen enough to know that those aren't just like crazy whimsical things that happen to him. I think this is who he is. However, you have to have the patience with the guy because he absolutely, in Dumb and Dumber fashion, totally redeems himself. So you need not panic when he drops a 3rd and 2 catch that would extend a drive. That sucks, but that's who he is. Life goes on. And if it's any evidence in these last couple games when he does have those drops, he usually roars back and does something pretty damn nifty to make up for it. I didn't know that Hockenson was a drop merchant at times, but now I've come to accept it. All right, maybe once every 2 games, hopefully once every 3 games, he has a shitty drop. But it's not an indictment of the man. He doesn't go to sleep thereafter. He usually comes back with a vengeance. But this guy is going to be the Vikings tight end for at least the next, 3, 4, hopefully 6, 7 years. He has drops, and then he scores touchdowns. And the touchdown that he caught on Saturday, on Christmas Eve, was marvelous. No tight end should be making that catch, but he did. Justin Jefferson, his continued quest for history. He had 12 receptions for 133 receiving yards, broke the Vikings all-time record held by Randy Moss, broke the receptions record held by Chris Carter, has sights set on keeping the lead on Tyreek Hill, getting 2,000 yards, and what else? Getting MVP votes. We're starting to bang the drum on that narrative a little bit. I've been doing it for about 2 months that I know he's not going to win it. I know that quarterbacks or wide receivers can't win the award. It's a quarterback award. But Jefferson should get some votes if he gets 2,000 yards and he keeps the lead over Tyreek Hill because he's the absolute lifeblood of this offense. I still cannot believe that when Stephon Diggs asked out of the the North Star State, that the byproduct of that request was Justin Jefferson because you just see it every week. He is on a relentless path to be one of the greatest of all time. If he stays healthy, there's nothing to stop him from being the greatest. That's the pace that he's on. He's only 20. I'm going to screw this up. Is he 23 or 24? He's one of those. I think he's 23. And every week, it's something new. We'll have a quiet game from him about once every 5 weeks because, the other team double teams him, or the things aren't going well for the Vikings, but this dude is marvelous, and he should get MVP votes, and he is a negative 800 favorite to win Offensive Player of the Year award, so that's happening. Another takeaway that isn't Vikings related is Daniel Jones is actually pretty good. This gentleman took 4 years to get into a spot where I think he's a trustable QB1. If you would have asked me last year, I would have been like, meh. If you asked me the year before that, I would have been like, meh. And now, observing him, he's fast. He makes the throws. He is a top 15 NFL quarterback. I think, we talk about Andy Dalton now as kind of a little journeyman between the Cowboys, Bears, and Saints. Well, Andy Dalton, once upon a time, was pretty good. He wasn't elite, but he was pretty good, and I think that's kind of where I have him pegged right now in the Bengals Andy Dalton category, where you're going up against him and you're like, oh, this guy's good. I didn't realize he was this good. And I think that's what the Giants have in Jones. They would be very strange to move on from him. I don't think that they will. And he's cooking to an extent with Brian Daboll. So I want to call that out, that my perception of Daniel Jones has changed this year, and this game confirmed it, that he is a QB1 in the league, and you need not debate anymore whether or not, should they send him elsewhere and think about someone else. Nope, I think Jones is the dude you can build upon. He's not absolutely fantastic, but he's pretty damn good. Finally, winding down the show, what about all these unsung guys for the Vikings that have shown up? I like to talk about what KJ Osborne did in 2021, because during training camp or preseason, nobody really cared about him because he didn't do shit in his rookie year. But then, out of the depths of the depth chart, he emerged in 2021 as a WR3 and a pretty damn good one. So I kind of been thinking all year, who's that going to be in 2022? And it's taken a while to get there. I think it's a combination of unsung defenders. Khyiris Tonga has a 70-something PFF. Duke Shelley is all of a sudden the 14th best cornerback in the league per PFF. He even qualifies for their little snap count now. And then Josh Metellus is continuing to be money. That block punt was stellar. And so you have these contributors, 2 of them from the Bears cast-offs, that are really making a difference. And I think for all of them, Tonga and Shelley, they might be more than just flashes in the pan. With Shelley, we weren't sure because, against the Bills, he had the big pass breakup in the red zone. And then thereafter, he had another red zone pass breakup. And you're starting, all right, he's good fit for this defense because he flexes when it matters. Well, he turns out he's just pretty good. So when Dantzler comes back, I'm not entirely sure where Shelley will fit in, but Shelley's good, and Tonga is going to get more time because James Lynch is now hurt for a couple games. And these 3 dudes, Tonga, Shelley, and Metellus, out of nowhere have become more than just like, oh yeah, he made a good play. The guys are pretty good, especially Metellus on special teams. So kudos to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah for finding Tonga, finding Shelley, and then Metellus for the staying power. He's a Spielman pick. But yeah, all of these guys are quietly pretty good football players, and more than just, oh, look at that one guy did in that one play. They're pretty good overall. All right, then finally I left this to last is that Greg Joseph's thumper of a field goal from 61 yards. That was only the 3rd time in Vikings history that they've even tried a field goal of 60 yards or more. And wouldn't you know it, he hit it. He hit it from 61 yards, and it was especially cool because this franchise here, we always feel snake-bitten in general, but also in the realm of kicks, those against the Vikings, and then those, going through the uprights, doinking off of them, or wide left or right. Greg Joseph hit the game winner, setting the Vikings record, 61 yards. And this dude is all about redemption. Last year, week 2, when he missed the give-me field goal that would have beat the Cardinals, all he did after that was really redeem himself. This year, he was on his bullshit again, missing all of those extra points and all of those long field goals. But quietly, in the past, 3 or 4 games, he's been flawless, perfect. And all he did was win the game against the Giants. So I think based on he's hit 5 game-winning field goals in 2022, and he hit a handful last year against the Packers, Giants. The Bengals should have been, last year I think he tied the game from 55 or something like that against the Bengals. So as much as we get frustrated, me included, because I said something to the effect on the show that they got to start thinking about what they're going to do. If this guy can't hit extra points, he ain't it. Well, of course I was wrong, and I think that even if he missed a game winner next week from 42 yards, against the Packers, you probably don't freak out and say the hell with this guy. He's a pretty damn good kicker, and he's going to have some lumps, kind of like I talked about Hawkinson earlier with the drops. And if you can get over those, the dude is pretty clutch. So kudos to Greg Joseph, the longest field goal in Vikings history. And he really got off the schneid because there was about a month there where he didn't look very good. Let's just get it out there. Thankfully, for his sake, he's always been automatic from, between 20 and 49 yards. And now he's getting hit in his groove from everywhere. All right, my final observation from the Giants game, but this is one that's going to propel, and I'll continue to bang the drum on this until the playoffs begin, is, all right, so the Vikings defense is not good enough to win a Super Bowl. Let's get that out loud. Say it with me. The Vikings defense isn't good enough as a standalone entity to win the Super Bowl. Now, when they do force those turnovers, then they're cooking. Then things are getting better. But there are a number of miniature sins on the Vikings roster and then the way that they play that they're not going to be good enough to win a Super Bowl. However, with the way that Kirk Cousins has been playing since the Detroit game, he alone can deodorize those stinky shortcomings that sometimes arise, whether it's the offensive line, Cousins getting smacked around, the defense letting yards, the ultimate bend but don't break stuff, and just the way that the games go in general. The Vikings' best hope of turning this 12-3 record, in all of these one-score games into something marvelous, including a Super Bowl trip, is if this Kirk Cousins hot streak can continue. This is why he was brought here in the first place in 2018, to get him to the promised land. And I don't think that the November Vikings, or let's see, maybe the team that beat the Jets, I don't think that team is good enough to get to the Super Bowl. However, I didn't know that a hot streak from Cousins was upcoming. So if he continues this, if it's not just 3 good games here, if this is a brand new renaissance with Kevin O'Connell offense, this can be a very special season, but it's all going to come down to whether or not Cousins does enough to rectify some of the other shortcomings. All right, that's all I got for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Josh Fry. I'm working on another guest for Thursday, and we are heading toward Packer Week. And, that game is going to be a playoff game for them and a pretty important game for the Vikings, but nothing compared to the Packer stakes. That's all I got. Have a good Tuesday, and Skol, baby.